how is the humor different and the culture different to, yeah, how are they both unique? And even to each other, how are they different to each other? And how did that shape your comedy?
Yeah, well, growing up, see, that's the thing too, is like, whilst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, there's a lot of people who have both, like myself, both have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. And again, I've got other non-Indigenous heritage. I mentioned my grandfather was white, and that was the English side. There's differences between Torres Strait, because the Torres Strait, if you look at it geographically, is right up Cape York Peninsula, like in the Torres Strait, the body of water between Australia and New Guinea. Um, it is different. So there are some similarities. So if you put a Torres Strait Islander in a room, like I say, you had to get a person who grew up fully immersed in the Torres Strait culture, and then someone from an Aboriginal culture, and put in the same room, they would have different things to laugh about, but there are different nuances. And in the terms of Torres Strait, it's this, I think, growing up there, there's a certain ways we say things, or the certain things that we do that we would find funny, because that's like, it's the inside joke there. And I can't think of an example off the top of my head, actually. But then Aboriginal communities, again, because there's so many. It's just different again. And ironically, I can't think of, like, I tell a joke, for example, I tell a joke of the nod. I talk about the nod. We walk into a room and I'll see another black fella. Say I might be in Sydney. I could be walking anywhere down the street. I could be walking down the street. I could be in a big conference room. I could be just in any public space. And there's other people, and I'd see another Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander person, and then what we'll do is we'll nod. It's a very slight, like, and they'll see eye contact, they'll make eye contact with me, then they'll nod. And it's like, there, I see you, you see me, we might not know each other, but we're acknowledging, and that, if anything happens, I've got your back, or let's get the fuck out of here together. You know what I mean? It's those sorts of things that Aboriginal people do, that Torres Strait Islander people do as well. But white fellas don't really do it. I'm sure people might, but it's not a part of the general community, general way of communication. So the nod is one of the things, so I tell jokes about the nod. I tell jokes about the way different words that we use, English words and also language words, we talk about, so it's, I mean, I could give examples, it's probably going to be lost on the listeners, but so I use the example, like I did a show this year I did a show that toured Adelaide Fringe Festival, the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, and the Sydney Comedy Festival, called Which Way, which is my actually my first solo show. And I take my listeners through the different language words, For example, we say, on TI, instead of saying hello, we don't say, we can say hello. I'm not saying we don't say hello, we do. But more common, or more often than not, if I saw you, Marvin, if I saw you down the street, I'd be like, hey, which way? That's how I greet you. Which way? You think, well, what way? But it's just, which way is hello. And there's only one answer to which way, in that same way. So if I saw you, I'd be like, hey, Marvin, which way? And you'd be like, oh, same way. And then we'll start our conversation, So there's different.
Okay.
And so in the show, I talk about these things, and I say which way. I said, I explain that to the audience, get them to say it back to them. So when I say which way, you fellas say, and they go same way. And I said, you could be having the best day of your life. I said, you could be having the worst day of your life. I said, you could be visiting your uncle in ICU that's about to depart this world, and you'd look down at him and you'd be like, hey, which way, uncle? And he'd be looking up at you, about to die, and you'd be like, same way, same way. It doesn't matter what the context, it's always the one answer, But, we play with these different words because I think my show, Which Way, was about, again, empathy and bringing communities together. So to take them behind the black veil and look, give an insight into Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander communities, I'd run them through terminologies. I'd run them through different nuances. Like, for example, another thing is where in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, you could say something that was very negative. You might say, oh, this is my haircut. You just get a haircut. Just got a haircut. That's my haircut. What do you reckon about my haircut? And I'd be like, you look like a fucking, sucked mango. And then as long as you say, so that's a sort of a negative comment, but as long as black fellas will say good ways immediately after, like good ways. And when you say good ways, it breaks the negativity in the statement that was just made. And everybody has a laugh, everyone has a laugh. So, taking my wide audiences on a journey around these different nuances of communication and the ways of being in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to find the funny in there. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people that come up to me later on that are non-Indigenous people that'll see me and they go, which way, or they'll come and say something cheeky and say to me, good ways, and then we just laugh, like, and that's the stuff that I love about comedy.